Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and I secretly want to open up a gourmet French fry restaurant. How does that sound, huh? Okay, anyway, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back. Welcome to 2019. I am Raymond, your host of the Beginner Photography Podcast, and we have done it. We have arrived to the future. If you're listening to this, welcome. Also, if you're listening to this in like 2025, let me know how 2019 turned out. That would be great. I'd love to know. I hope that you had a great New Year's. I know I really didn't do much, honestly. In years past, I've done a lot. Last year we had like a little family get together, and that was fun. But this year my wife had to work, so it was just me and the kids. Charlie had piano lessons, and I was in bed pretty early, in fact. So we cut the cord earlier this year, so I stayed up to try to like watch like the ball drop. But unfortunately, you can't do that when you cut the cord. At least we can. So I went to bed. So I hope I really hope that you took some time over the past month to really reflect on where you were in 2018. As far as your photography goes, and where you want to be in 2019, because I just think that, New Year's, it really gets me thinking about the future, and thinking about the future is fun and exciting. There's so many opportunities, and every year, this should have been my intro fact today, dang it. I've always had this idea to make a journal of everything that I ate in a year, like for an entire year, like make a coffee table book. Unfortunately, like 6 years ago, no, I guess it was like 8 years ago, I found that somebody had already done that, and I bought the book, and it was way better than anything that I could have come up with. So I didn't do that. But the point of that being is that like it's a fresh start. It seems like, and it's always fun and just like an exciting time. There's like an electricity in the air. So thinking about the future is really exciting for me, and that is why I have brought on Chris Marquardt today onto the podcast. He is the host of the Future of Photography podcast, and today we get to talk about this really exciting time to be alive and where we are headed. But if you just got a brand new camera for the holidays and are thinking, wait, I don't even know how to work this thing, and now I have to worry about the future of photography? Well, no. This interview is more of a fun mental exercise, and not how to change everything you know or don't know. So this isn't like you need to buy this camera and that because this is where the future is headed. This is, like I said, it's two photographers talking about the future of photography, where we're headed, and it's just a fun interview, I think, to listen to. It was definitely a fun one to be a part of. But if this is your first time here listening to me, Raymond Hatfield of the Beginner Photography Podcast, and you're trying to learn how to use this new camera of yours, I want to invite you to sign up for our free online 2-day video photography bootcamp, which teaches you all about the basics of photography. And you can get started taking better pictures today, which is what we all want to do, right? So if you're interested, you can sign up over on our website at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. So with that, let us get into today's interview with Chris Marquardt. And stick around after the interview where I will name the winner of the GoPro Hero 7 Black. Okay, let's go. A quick introduction, and then we'll go ahead and get on into it after the call, after we, say thank you so much for coming on.
Sure.
Don't hang up at that point. I'll just wrap everything up. All right?
Totally fine.
Okay. Do you have any water or anything close by?
No, but I won't need any.
Okay. Okay, here we go. And just to double confirm, your last name is Marquardt, correct?
Yeah, pronounce it whichever way you want. That is pretty close, actually.
Okay, perfect. Okay, here we go. Today's guest is Chris Marquardt, a photographer, author, and host of the Future of Photography podcast. And what better time to talk about the future of photography than the start of a new year? So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I am really excited for this episode today because I know that we're technically recording this here in 2018. This is going to come out in 2019. And the beginning of a new year is always exciting because there's new camera technology. We always have these grand ideas of what the future is going to hold, and we never seem to figure it out. There's all this new technology, and I really want to chat with you about that today. But before we get into that, I know that you've been shooting for years. Can you tell me how it all started photography wise for you?
Oh, just out of interest, I have no formal education. I'm completely self-taught. I started shooting when I was 14, and that was my first SLR with film back then, and it just kept going and going, and I was interested, and I learned, and I improved, and then I went digital, and then I rediscovered analog after a while, actually. So I'm shooting both film and digital, and yeah, that's how I got here, just by being curious.
So what was it that drew you into the first place? What was it about that first camera that you saw that you thought, oh, I got to pick that up?
I was always interested in some form of artistic expression, even though I didn't really know back then that was a thing, to freeze a moment and to show a picture that you want to show. So with photography, you always have this this ability to leave things out, to design things, to compose things, and that was quite appealing to me.
Yeah. Now I know that you said that you were self-taught. What would you say was the hardest part about the technical side of photography for you to learn?
Honestly, the technical side is probably the more easy one for me, because I do have an art background, but also a technical background. I used to work in the computer industry for a while. I used to do all the internet stuff, and I always ended up being the kind of the link, the translator between like business people and tech people, and so I was always kind of in the middle there. And with photography, I see myself somewhere in a similar role, because I understand the art side of it quite well, but I also understand the technical side, and bringing those two together, I think that's the sweet spot.
Right. So was there anything that was difficult for you to understand? Was it like composition or just seeing the light, anything like that?
Well, seeing the light is obviously kind of the thing. The moment I understood light better, that was when my photography really changed, and I would I would recommend for everyone to do just that little, the egg assignment, where
I'm not sure.
you take a hard-boiled egg, you take like a desk lamp in a dark room, and then you photograph that by lighting it with that desk lamp from different angles, different distances, different heights,
Oh,
changing the size of that light source, and that, as simple and as funny as that sounds, this is really a very good way to get a better idea of what does that do. I mean, that egg can stand in for anything, like a head in a portrait shot or something along those lines. So you can easily translate that, what you learned there, and it will help you in your photography. And that's a good first step. A second exercise that is easy to do is um, look out of a window where you live and photograph the building next door, a tree, something that's there, and do that repeatedly over, I don't know, a few months, a few years. Every now and then take that same photo in different lighting conditions. And I did this with, like, I live here in Germany, and I had this view of a church, and at, there were all these different light situations, in overcast, in direct sunlight, in the evening sun, during a thunderstorm, with dark clouds behind it, with bright clouds behind it, and that just in total ended up being a really good exercise, going back to those pictures and just understanding what light will actually do to a photo.
yeah. I would imagine that just observing light is something that is difficult to get started with, but once you kind of understand it, where it's coming from, and how it can change the
And it takes a
properties of it.
while, it just
Right.
takes a while. It's I know people always are looking for the silver bullet, something that will get them from 1 to 100 in a few minutes. And no, you have to take a bit of time and practice these things, and the practice will make you better.
Yeah, yeah. Would you recommend doing the egg experiment several times?
Sure.
Yeah.
Every now and then, and it doesn't have to be an egg. I mean, take anything that nicely reflects light and play with it. Look at the different light sources you have available. It could be a bigger surface light source. It could be just a point light source from a little LED flashlight or something. And experiment with that, with the size of the light, with the distance of the light, with the strength of the light, with the direction of the light, and yeah, be playful. I think that's what helps most.
Yeah, exactly. That curiosity is really going to kind of bring you to that next spot for sure. Now, so we know that you picked up this film camera and then you kind of progressed to digital, you said. Can can you tell me how far along into your journey of photography were you until when you first picked up that digital camera, and what did that mean to you?
Oh, must be over 20 years into my photography when digital came along, and being a bit of a tech head myself, the
It's really exciting.
going into digital was exciting because I didn't have to wait for my photos to come back from a lab. It was just immediate, and that's what also gave me an additional boost in my learning, because you have the immediate feedback and you just learn very, very quickly, uh, especially these kind of things, the light things. You have much more of an immediate feedback there, and that changed a lot of things. And I ended up selling my SLRs right away, and in retrospect, it was a bit of a mistake, but it was really kind of a revelation how fast everything moved forward all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that photography and technology have this really like beautiful relationship together, uh, even from the beginning, like literally like the first camera. So can we kind of start before we start going forward about the future of photography? Can you kind of give us a history lesson of photography and let us know how we got here?
Hmm. So this all started. I mean, I don't want to go into like the daguerreotype and all this very
Sure.
old stuff, but pretty much film photography is what photography was, and it started with large formats, with big formats, and those shrunk over time because film became better, and you didn't have to have the bigger surfaces anymore. And I think the longest format that we've had around is 35 millimeter. Oscar Barnack, Leica employee, came up with that, and it has been the gold standard for almost ever now. And so that's what a lot of people who came to photography through SLRs are used to. And interesting enough, if you look at on the film side, that comes from the bigger formats, and if you look from the digital side, it's kind of hard to make bigger sensors. It's expensive to do that. So the sensors were really tiny, and they kept growing until they ended up calling it full frame. If you speak German, you know that the 35 millimeter format in German is called small format. And so the film heads call it small format, and the digital ones call it full format. It's the same
Yeah.
thing, and it is kind of a sweet spot in terms of manufacturing. And we're seeing a lot of mirrorless full frame cameras coming out now. But yeah, the history is film, and film has pretty much gone for a while, and now it's kind of coming back, and it's interesting. A lot of people who didn't shoot film are getting interested in how it relates to photography and what it can do for you. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing film again, because it gives me access to different formats like medium format, large format, and it also kind of slows me down and gives me a physical result. I can touch the negative, and
Yes, that's always
that
so much fun.
that adds so much value, so much perceived value to the photo, and so much happiness, because our digital photos are all somewhere in the cloud, right? They're just
Right.
not, you cannot touch them until you print them. And with film photography, you have access, you have a haptic experience, and that's, I think, a very good thing.
Yeah, of course. Do you think that's the main reason, or that's the main motivating driver for the rest of the industry to start picking up film again?
Well, on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, it's also financial reward. If you look at Fujifilm, who are big in digital cameras, but they also came from film. They also make film still. Um, Fuji Instax, the instant photo product that they have, is their biggest cash cow.
Of
Makes
course.
more money than all of their digital stuff together. So people want that experience, to have that physical photo, the one of a kind thing, that just adds value, perceived value, and that is makes photography different. And another thing that film photography does is it teaches you a lot, because with our cameras, I mean, they do everything for us, right? We press the shutter and they focus and they expose and they some even choose the moment when to shoot, so it's a guaranteed smiling photo.
Yeah.
And with film, there's a lot of stuff that you have to be aware of, that you have to take care of. And even though we don't really need it, it's good to have those skills even when you shoot digital, because often the camera doesn't get it quite right. And if you manage to overwrite and to take control of some of the things, you'll be a better photographer. So film teaches you, and you can take those things back into digital and be a better photographer that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It is fun. It is that tangible result that you get knowing that you got the perfect moment. There's really not much
Mm-hmm.
better than that. But as far as today, here we are, right? We have cameras that are small enough to fit in our pockets with great ISO performance. We have all the megapixels we need, and these cameras are waterproof, right? Like, is that don't we have enough now? Like, is this it? Is this the best?
We never have enough. I
That's a
think
very
it's
American way of thinking there, Chris.
well. I think okay. I personally I'd be happy with the cameras I have right now. But then I'm also curious. I mean, that's what's one of the reasons that Adrian and I, my partner and I, started the Future Photography podcast, because we are both kind of rooted in film. We both shoot digital, and we are both really curious about where this is going. And I mean, if we look just again a bit at the history, there are some pivotal moments in photography, some moments where things changed, and one was definitely back the original Leica rangefinder cameras shooting 35 millimeters. Um, Another thing where it really changed was when SLRs came along, when you had when you could see the photo through the lens, which is in digital is easy, but
Yes,
in a mechanical way with mirrors and stuff and a prism, that's not really
much more
that
difficult.
simple. Yeah, but that really changed a lot of things. The shutter in the camera used to be in the lens, and then it moved into the camera, so the lenses became cheaper, so photography became more accessible. And then they started adding computers to the cameras to help you with exposure, and motors to help you with focus, and that all changed it and made it more accessible to people again. And then it turned in well, the whole thing turned digital, which again made it way more accessible to people. And then there was miniaturization, and that, I mean, every person on this planet has a camera in their pocket now, at least
Yes,
one,
several. Yeah.
at least one, and you always have it with you. And those are incredibly powerful nowadays. And the one thing that's now happening, I think we're right in the middle of another big shift, and that is the computational photography, where a lot of things are not done in hardware anymore, where a lot of things are done by computation, by software. And I think that's what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I think that's what is getting really exciting, right? Because once again, this is the curiosity. This is where who knows what can happen with this camera when a computer is involved, and it's one of the things that I definitely want to get into for sure. But before we do that, what do you think is one of the misconceptions people have about the future of photography and just having more cameras?
Well, the one thing that I think is kind of over at this point is the megapixel race.
Sure.
I mean, they're adding, they're not 20 megapixels, they're now 35 and 40 and 50, but I don't think this will go on forever because you don't really have much benefit from more pixels.
Sure.
So I think one of the misconceptions is that it's just going to be more of the same, just more and bigger.
Right.
Um, I think we're looking at a fundamental change. The biggest misconception I see is that people expect it's like when cars came along and people were expecting the horse drawn carts kind of just with motors, they replaced
Yeah.
the horse with a motor instead of thinking ahead and looking at what cars might be in the future, and they have totally changed. They're not they're not just they didn't just replace horses with motors. And I think the same is going to happen in photography, where there are a few things that are pretty clearly on the horizon, and then there are a few things that, yeah, my guess is as good as yours.
With okay, so let's get into that a little bit then, because we're currently living in an age which is definitely one of the craziest times to be alive in the history of photography, and which you couldn't have said like 20 years ago, right? We might have been at the pinnacle at that point 20 years ago, but today, like you said, there's a fundamental shift happening, and it's because of computation and information technology. Cameras where you can choose your focus point after you've taken the photo, or cameras that automatically adjust the settings based on what it sees in front of the camera, or recommend compositional changes just based on AI. But we're still at the beginning of all of this technology,
Oh,
even
yes.
though it's changing. Like, there's no doubt about it. We are at the beginning of this technology. Do you think that we can see what the future truly holds for photography, or are we still looking way too narrowly minded?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's with every fundamental shift in a technology or a cultural shift that comes with it. I remember when I was younger, and the we still had records and CDs, and I envisioned the music to turn into like little chips, almost like
Right.
an SD card, and
Yeah.
I envisioned that you'd go into a store and buy one of these little chips with music on it. What I totally didn't see was the internet. So I thought I had a vision there, but I totally missed that one thing, and now music just comes streaming to us. So
Right.
I think we are bound to make the same mistakes when thinking into the future of photography. We are going to not see some fundamental things that are going to happen sometime sooner or later. I think that's just a fact. It's hard to really predict the future. If it was easy, I'd probably be rich by now.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'd all be millionaires for sure. It's funny, just kind of bouncing off your experience with music. When I was in, it must have been like middle school, so like seventh or eighth grade, is when I saw the first like RCA MP3 player, and like inside it had like 16 megabytes of storage, right? Extremely tiny. And I knew, like, the moment that I held that in my hand, I was like, this is the future. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Because kind of like you, I thought I can just switch out the chips and just
Hmm.
put them in, and like, it's a much smaller package. So I had saved like an entire summer's worth of like mowing lawns to buy this thing. And the day that I went to go buy it, my stepdad went with me, and he saw it, and he's like, he literally said, this technology is going nowhere. People have spent so much money on CDs. Nobody is going to buy this MP3 player. It makes no sense. And here we are. And my stepdad was wrong. And I always love to rub that in his face. So we'll go ahead and move on from that. But I think it's funny because like you said, I never would have guessed. When I had my Moto Razor, or even this Sony, you know, floppy disk Mavica, right, that I was using in yearbook,
Hmm.
that we would be to where we are today. That is a glorified button. That's all that it does, right? It just opens up the shutter. It makes no decisions whatsoever, and then it's done. And now here we are at a time where where you can take amazing photos without any intervention as far as the camera goes. Do you think that that is going to degrade the perceived value of photography? Because that's something that I think about a lot.
Enjoying today's interview with Raymond's guest? Want to hear their full interview and gain access to more monthly educational photography tutorials? Become a premium member of the podcast. There is no commitment and you can cancel at any time. To sign up, head over to patreon.com/beginner photography podcast or by clicking the banner on beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Sign up and start taking better photos today. Now, let's get back to the interview with Raymond's guest.
With all this excitement of new cameras, new technology, IT technology, I want to know for you, Chris Marquardt, what is in the perfect camera? Like, current technology aside, what would the perfect camera look like in the future of photography?
That is a good question, because I'm an old fart. You know, I want my mirrors. I'm happy with my DSLRs, and because I know them and I built up all the skill to use them. So that's something that's gonna be taken away from me pretty soon, because I'm pretty sure my DSLRs are the last mirror-based cameras that I'm using.
Sure.
Their mirrors on the way out, so their history. We see the full-frame mirrorless trend. And the viewfinders now, the electronic viewfinders have become so good that I'll probably be just fine without a mirror. So I'm not worried about that. But they are heavy beasts still, especially when you're looking at full frame. So full frame is, it just kind of it mandates the lenses
size
to be big, because optics is that's just optics. So using smaller sensors and more of them, making cameras into camera arrays that are smaller, something along the lines of what L16 does, the light.co.
Yes.
Is exciting. Now the product isn't there. I mean, read some of the reviews and you'll see that even the hardware is good, but the software is kind of a bit of a problem.
Lacking, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think they're there yet, and I think their move to a smartphone with multiple cameras in it is an interesting one, at least, because all that computation is sooner or later going to replace the big and heavy glass, and that's gonna be painful for me, because I love my glass, I love my good lenses and the big chunks of metal. But on the other hand, having that available in smaller and much more easy to carry packages that give me the exact same quality or better, who wouldn't love that? So
of course.
And speaking of the megapixels, I think we have plenty of resolution now, but I also said that when we were at 12 megapixels. So I don't think we can ever have enough, at least to a certain point. So I think there is still something in it. On the other hand, there are now algorithms out there that can resize photos without quality loss. They can upsize photos by synthesizing parts of the image. So
do you think that the future is going to be 5 megapixel sensors with 20 megapixel outputted files?
Or at least they use the current sensors and they run those through algorithms and have 20 megapixels in there and make 100 out of them. For some photography, I think that'll be just fine. It'll, again, not give you the exact thing you see, but something that is so good and so believable that and this is not fantasy. This is already out there. These algorithms are out there. I've seen examples that were just mind-blowing, where they had like a small resolution photo of a bird and they blew it up big, and the feathers were just perfect with all the fine detail. And what the thing did was an AI that was trained on recognizing what is missing, and then it synthesized feathers that looked similar to the thing, but totally believable. So
it's not even just like filling in the missing data. It's going out finding new data, and
it has learned what feathers look like. It has learned what skin looks like, and so on. That is a scary thought. But
yeah, because suddenly it's like all these years, like in courtrooms, you hear that like a camera like cannot lie, but now here we are at a place
cameras
to where
can lie quite well.
It will be lying as best as it can. Yeah, that's very scary. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up for sure.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We had a couple of episodes on the future of photography about exactly that, because it scares us as well. And
Yeah.
it's but on the other hand, what we're looking at with photography, if it's not scientific photography, if it's more on the art side, it's evoking emotion, right? That's what it's all about. If someone loves a photo, they love it for reasons they probably don't even know. And at that point, I question if it's important that those feathers are the exact original feathers, or if they're just very similar to the ones that should be there.
I think that's the right question. I think that's the right question right there. Yeah, I mean, it really is going to depend on the case, on what it's being used for, and I guess having access to whatever the original is going to be, because that's what's going to tell the truth, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
I think
the
my wife just
truth.
watches way too many crime shows. That's all that I think about
Well,
now when it comes to cameras.
in these days, truth is a very touchy concept.
It's not even. It doesn't even always have the exact same definition, which is
Yep.
what's most scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm definitely going to have to link to those episodes in the show notes of this episode. When it comes to people just getting started in photography today, they have more opportunity at their disposal than ever before. Do you think that there's any misinformation that they're being taught that you think is just that they just shouldn't be listening to?
Well, as much as people might hate that, but I think the simple answer is there's no silver bullet. You will still have to learn. You'll still have to spend the time and put in the work to become better, and not better at the technical side. That's very easy to learn, at least for tech-minded people. But it's still your responsibility to frame the shot, to compose the shot, to choose a focal length, to press the shutter button at a point in time, even though that is now kind of in the flux. But it's still your task to make the photo, to compose the photo. And that is something that takes a lot of looking at other photography. That takes trial and error. What works, what doesn't work, why does it work, why doesn't it work? And yeah, I think that's really important, to learn and give it time and experiment, and don't be too afraid to share, because even if you're just at the beginning of that process, sharing with others is going to give you feedback, is going to give you information as to how you want to go forward. So put in the work. Don't just take a photo on the weekend and go, I'm a photographer now. It'll just be a bit more effort.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice right there. When it comes to growing your skills, or I guess anything for that matter, have you ever had an investment? I want to know what the best investment that you've ever made in yourself is, whether it's through money, time, or energy. What has advanced you most as a photographer?
Well, most of the things, investments are not financial. The investment is the time, is the amount of photography that you do, because the best way to become better is by doing a lot of it. And if you have a way to kind of force you into it, maybe pick up assignments somewhere, pick up a job that makes you go out and shoot regularly, then you will put in the hours and you'll put in the time, and you'll, as a reward, you will become a better photographer. So I think that's probably the biggest investment that you can make. Just spend the time.
Yeah, and finding ways to force yourself to find that time is.
And I'm lazy. I mean, I need
So
ways
am
to
I.
do that. So the moment I started teaching it, I became much better. The whole podcasting thing, I've been podcasting for 14 years now, and that has really fueled my growth in photography, because I have to have content ready every week.
Yeah.
And that means I will get questions from people. I have to research stuff, because of course I don't know everything. So that all together is maybe start a podcast about photography. Everyone
There
can
you
do
go.
nowadays. Making a podcast isn't that hard, so everyone can do that. And teaching others is definitely a good way to advance that.
Yeah, I will let all the listeners know that if you think that starting a podcast is hard, I did it. And if I did it, you should see my high school transcripts. You will know that it does not require being very smart to start a podcast. It's very easy. So, again, great information. I want to know what advice, this is my last question for you. I know we're going over on time. I want to know what advice you would give to a new photographer about to set out on their photography journey. What information would you give that smart and driven new photographer?
Keep at it. Don't give up too quickly. There's this wonderful short snippet of Ira Glass. It's on YouTube. It's about creativity and about how you become better at things. And I'm just looking it up. We'll link to that in the show notes.
Absolutely.
The creative process and how you, I mean, let me try to paraphrase that. How you start off with something and you have killer taste. Everyone has taste, and you see the good things and you want to do those things and you want to become good, but your skills are just not quite where your taste is. And that's kind of the level to achieve, to get your skills to where your taste is. And Ira Glass has a few interesting things to say about that, and it's definitely one of those very motivating things to watch. So I'll send you the link.
Absolutely. You're definitely not the first person to talk about the power of this talk that Ira Glass gave. Mm-hmm. It is, like you said, it's one of those things that sticks with you no matter where you're at, I guess, in your photography journey, for sure. So that will definitely be in the show notes of this episode.
Cool.
I'm sorry. I thought I just heard my wife screaming out there. She is okay. I think she's just laughing. That was
That's good.
I might have had to have cut this a little bit short. But Chris, before I do let you go, and I'm 90% positive she's okay, but I'm going to assume that the other 10% she is okay. Before I let you go, can you let listeners know where they can find you online?
I think the best place to look is on my own homepage, chrismarquardt.com. We'll give you the link. And that leads to everything, the podcasts and the books and the photo travel and everything else I do.
So I said that was the last question, but actually this is going to be the last question. With photography, we talked about it being a very immersive experience. And that's why I think social networks are kind of taking off, right? Because people like to experience other people's experiences, I guess. Do you have a favorite social network?
I'm still on Twitter mostly.
Oh, really? The most text-heavy platform is your favorite.
It handles photography quite well. I'm also on Instagram, and I'm a bit on Facebook, even though I'm not a real fan of Facebook. But
right.
Yeah, Twitter would be probably my main hangout place online. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, if anybody is listening who's on Twitter, go ahead and give Chris a follow. Chris, again, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your thoughts, and talking about the future of photography. It's something that I'm excited for, and I can't wait to be there along with you.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me.
Was I right about that being just a fun interview to listen to? It's one of those things that it's hard to write questions for an interview like that because it's all just speculation. But I did have quite a few takeaways from this interview talking with Chris. And my biggest one, I think, was when I asked if computers will be able to learn our style and will shoot like us and edit how we edit. And just replicate everything. And he replied with, yeah, of course. But it might not be extremely useful because we still learn and grow as photographers every day, no matter where we are, in our photography journey. And it just isn't, even if a computer could shoot in our style and edit in our style, it will become stagnant because if we just let the computers do all the work, then we're not going to be learning and growing as artists and as photographers. And that statement right there really pushed, I think, the usefulness of a photographer to me, at least out a few more years. So, hey, I got a question for you. Did you get a new Amazon device this holiday season? If so, did you know that you could use it to start off every day by learning more about photography using our daily photo briefing? That's right. You can just ask Alexa to launch the daily photo brief. My Alexa just went off there. Oops, hold on. Okay. Or you can just search for photography in the Alexa app and add it to your daily flash briefing, which is great because every morning you can wake up and learn more about photography while you are in the shower or brushing your teeth or even making coffee. You know, it requires no extra time out of your day. You can do what you're already doing and become a better photographer soon. So now it is time. It is time to announce the winner of the GoPro Hero 7 Black. That is a really long name. GoPro. Why don't they just take out the word hero? The GoPro 7 Black. So to be entered in the contest, all you had to do was be signed up for the newsletter, which is why it's so important to sign up for the 2-day photography bootcamp so that you can be a part of future giveaways. Everybody who's on the email list is automatically entered. So we got a surprising over 500 people entered in the month of December, which is awesome. So then it came time to pick a winner. So to pick a winner, I imported our entire list into a random name picker, which you can find the exact one that I used over at miniwebtool.com/random-name-picker. Okay. So once I did all that, it was a lot of emails. I went ahead and pressed enter to pick a random name, and I have it. The winner of the GoPro 7 Black is Chris Thompson from right here in the USA. So today we have 2 Chris's on today's podcast, which is awesome. So Chris, since you are not in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, you need to check your email so that I know where to send this beauty. So Chris, maybe you should sign up for the, or maybe you should join the Facebook group and get notified much quicker. But regardless, congratulations, Chris. That was a complete blast. I know that you're going to love this camera as much as I love mine. It even though it's so small, and I don't know, it is fundamentally, I think, changed how I view photography. So, Chris, I know that you're going to enjoy it. All right, guys, that was our interview today. Why don't you join me again next week and we will do it all over again. So there you have it. Until next week, I want you to get out. I want you to keep shooting. I want you to focus on yourself and stay safe. Okay? That is it. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.